Bruno, I think we might, if we can kick off a little bit early, it'll be nice. So we'll welcome you to the podium. Now, Bruno, we only unfortunately have 5 minutes for each speaker, so you don't leave too many times for questions if you want to get your point of view over, because questions haven't been that great, I would have to say.
Well, so, I promise this will be the shortest submission you've heard from me, and unless you bombard me with difficult questions, we should well be under time.
It's your time, mate. We're on.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to you today, and I firstly would like to say that I fully support option 2, not option 1, as my online submission seems to indicate, but I did go on to say option 2 is what I support. I mean, I like the idea of carrots. I think riparian planting and the like are a must going forward to a more sustainable future, and I feel we really owe it to the land and to future generations. We need to embrace the change toward biodiversity. This sort of leadership should come from the Regional Council. This is your mandate and your responsibility. Plus, there are clear indications being directed from David Parker at Central Government as to your obligations and responsibilities. So I totally endorse this as the preferred option. Moving on to the Partnerships for Change, again I support option 2 to fund initiatives for the Regional Council to work together to improve Hawke's Bay's land use and biodiversity. No one likes paying rates, but I mean, my combined rates bill is somewhere over 40,000 between the District Council and Regional Council, and it hurts. However, I don't mind paying them when I think they're going to a good cause. And I really think this is a good cause. We need to look at the impact some of our farming methods are having on our environment, and we know things must change. We should embrace the smart farming methods happening in New Zealand and look at what other countries are doing. Often the information available to us comes from sources where there are vested interests. There's tended to be a monopoly on this sort of information from corporate entities, and it tends to push us in one direction only. I think it'd be great to see the Partnerships for Change get more traction. This could mean using a combination of existing expertise in the Regional Council and other advice and contacts around New Zealand to direct farmers towards new roads and avenues to help us towards a better future. Promoting field days, on the ground, communication with farmers, that sort of thing. I'm a big believer in the FEMPs and the farm management plans, and I think the more information you can get to advise both yourselves and for farmers to advise themselves on such things as nitrogen leaching, it's a critical process to go through. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. That was very quick and short. Questions? My question is, I didn't know you had so much frontage to the tuk-tuk when I read your submission.
Well, that's a historical river boundary too, because it's a riparian right, and we do have a large chunk, nearly 3 k's of river frontage.
3 k's, yeah.
Running along there. It's of course we don't graze it with cattle anymore, haven't done for probably 10 years, but we do run sheep down there still occasionally. It's turning to gorse quite rapidly, but what follows gorse might be a bit more exciting.
Are there any other questions for Bruno? Well, thank you very much, Bruno. Oh, yeah, no, there was one. Sorry. Speak up, Tom Belford.
We've heard from some other folks in the farming community that basically all's well. The sector groups, we pay dues to them. They give us all the information we need. They have great websites, et cetera, and that making further investments in that direction in terms of, let's say, a future farming trust or what have you, it would be redundant or duplicative of those kinds of efforts. What's your take on that?
Well, I totally disagree. I think there's certainly mechanisms, there's certainly good farming techniques out there, and they are being promulgated or publicised to some extent. However, I think you know, it's a question of how you get that message across to farmers, which is more important. And as I mentioned, maybe field days and other sort of other methods of facilitating that communication between your skill group and what's already out there and the farmers is imperative. And I think it's just a leadership role. It's easy for this sort of stuff to drag on and for farmers to say, well, we're embracing change, but how quickly are they really embracing change? I can't agree with that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Bruno. That was our 5 minutes, and I just want to say we really appreciate all the work and your leadership in our community that you give us. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno.
Thanks, Bruno.
Thanks, Bruno. Megan, I feel we're in for a bit of a bashing here.
You quite like that, though. Don't do the big build-up that I'm hearing.
Well, you know.
You go for a while and false sense of security.
We were waiting and then you messed around.
I know, well, I suddenly thought about my phone. Hello,
Okay, welcome,
everybody.
Meg. We always
Thank
love
you.
to have you along. So, yes, I know you've only got 5 minutes, and we haven't pressed the button yet, but shall we?
Yeah, press the button. So, I only have 5 minutes. And like everybody else who comes along to these things, unless they represent an organisation, this year we find out we only have 5 minutes. And it stopped me in my tracks as I threw away my 10-minute PowerPoint preparation. You're right, Peter, I never do a PowerPoint presentation. But I could have.
You could.
I could have. And I thought, what is the point? And as people around me are talking about, what is the point? It's actually really insulting. So it made me think about what is the point of public engagement? What are you actually wanting out of this? And it's important to note here that you are within a machine. I understand that, and sometimes it feels like you can't change the mechanism. But those in the room who run businesses know that mechanisms are there to be fit for purpose. And what I'm hearing, and what I have been trying to spend the last year telling you, is that we no longer think this organisation or the majority of the public sector or service is fit for purpose. So, again, come back to the original question, what is the purpose of public engagement? Is it to inform? Is it to provide accountability? Or is it to just simply validate an idea? So I need to tell you that being on the end of public decision making has begun to feel like a lesson in feeling irrelevant. And it's not pleasant. And yes, I am more courageous than most. I literally come along every time. I feel the obligation to advocate for those that don't. But I am becoming by far the majority, and you know it, and I know it, and our voting stats know it. So here's the opportunity. Because as I said to you last year, I hate having the same conversation over and over again. So I'm not going to attend these anymore, because if I receive something that says you have 2.5 minutes to change the conversation, I'm not going to be able to come in here with a smile. So I'm exiting the process, joining the throngs of the public that no longer have faith in this, no longer feel trust in the system, no longer feel that they're heard, no longer feel relevant. And I'm responding to what I had tried to come and talk to you about during the last year, the large group of people who want to do it a different way, change the conversation for good. But instead of taking that opportunity, I got an email saying, thank you for your interest. So it is frustrating trying to get in here. It is frustrating knowing that what is said in here isn't necessarily going to come out in the wash. Like on last year's webcam, the conversation about bringing the public into the conversation around the tagline, which is, at its core, setting our focus for this organisation, setting those core imperatives for the people that you serve. So in my business life, I hear the word leadership a lot, and as I tell everyone that comes to me for help within that, leadership is just good management. There is no such thing as learnt leadership. You do what people need you to do, they will follow you. You call yourself leaders and don't do what we need you to do, we will not follow you. And we are seeing that not just within this organisation, certainly regionally, and I won't run off a list of examples. We're seeing it on a national scale, and we are seeing it globally. So I think there needs to be an alternative to change the conversation for good. Fortunately, a whole lot of people agree with me, and I've been given a big fat chunk of money to respond to that need wherever it is, whether that's around the country or whether that's overseas. And I really, really tried to get in here this year to talk to you about that. And I have a lovely email trail to show it. I do have more courage than most to come in here, but I have the same level of frustration when I don't get the opportunity to be heard or stand in the room. So you won't see me in here again, which will, I'm sure, bring smiles to some, but will also kill a little bit of the joy that comes from these things. But so I'd like to end with thank you for your time, because that literally is all you have given me. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. We'll be very sad not to see you again next year, but
I know.
thanks for your
If
presentation.
it was effective, I'd come back, Rex. I really would.
It is effective. Okay, but we need to move on. Marei, Heretaunga Taiwhenua. Welcome, Marei.
Tu ake au ki te mihi ki a koe, te reo o te Taiwhenua e Heretaunga me ngā hapu o Heretaunga. A kānui te mihi atu ki te i takoto te kaupapa ki rungi i te tepu. Nō reira, kānui tako whakamiharo ki a koe he reo kaha. Mo ngā me e pāna ki ngai tāua. Nō reira, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe. Just to basically give a quick response back, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koe. Mai kia mihi atu ki au tēnei wā. I tēnei wā, kei runga te marae tō tātou nei marae o Waipatu, he te tangihana o te hōrangatira Henare Harris, called Francis Harris tērā. So I'm just informing Mike that I've just come from the Pai Pai over at Waipatu, playing tag with Mr. Ngahiwi Tōmona, and that, yes, this fits in amongst our cultural duty, Mr. Chairman. So thank you very much for having taken the opportunity for me to accept and receive my feedback to the submissions of LTB.
And if you return to the tangi, could you please extend our condolences?
I will, I shall.
Thank you. Okay, mate, you're on.
Well, I'm going to keep it a little bit like Bruno, short, and if you have any questions to ask me. We went ahead and filled in the options of the 7 options. I concurred with at least 5 of them. And I've come really here to seek the support and continuation on, as it was written in my submission, which I hope that you have before you, and it's in the 7th paragraph, the Māori monitoring framework work, which was undertaken as the result of the direction of the Board of Inquiry, focus mainly to define values, and in particular Māori, of which a number of people get to look and say, well, what exactly does that mean to you? As it's been often quoted by yourself, Mr. Chairman, that our culture has a way of looking through a different lens. But I wanted to assure each and every one of Council, because you invested in on the past 12 months of this particular project with the support of Mr. Ian Maxwell, in enabling the undertaking of a 4-seasonal wānanga process, which it was commenced at Matahiwi Marei. We're up to our 3rd one at this stage. The fundamental purpose is to produce a scorecard that will, I hope, touch hard, be able to sit alongside of the state of environment reporting process that you are required as council to undertake. And the difference will be this unique way to measure cultural values, which unfortunately gets to be in the too hard basket at most times. I see that the rest of the country is still playing up their ability in amongst different authorities to define exactly what those things are, particularly as they roll down into key attributes. I believe that this process is going to enable the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and of course Tangata Whenua to work a little bit more closer together, and it's really important that this first year leg of work, which is quite resource hungry, as you know, when you start to recruit all sorts of specialist technical people, that it needs to be carried on for at least another half-year term, which was premised by the original application proposal. So beside that issue, and you have the paperwork that's in front of you, my second take was also to say that our Taiwhenua has been undertaking science wānanga in collaboration with the University of Otago. We're into our 6th year that we've been able to underwrite half of the cost, which has fundamentally been about $12,000 per year. What the science wānanga is focused on are year 8-9 students, and we track those students in relation to another project that's happening in Hastings and also in Napier, to track young people into the career pathway of science, the field of science. So it's something that I think that's really important in terms of building the capacity and knowledge locally from the grassroots through a process such as this. So I just want to flout the fact that we've got these things that are going on in our Taiwhenua. And Mr. Chairman, that's basically it. So if there's any questions in relation to my submission too as well on the options, more than happy to try and answer them. Kia ora.
Thank you. Questions? Marei, I have a question. Touched on in your submission, but not directly related to. As mana whenua in Heretaunga, and especially around the Ngāroa, how do you feel the tank process has worked for mana whenua?
Look, there's been some significant changes. We've been all on this for the last 5-6 years, and it's been challenging for everyone with regards to the way that this process is travelling. There's big there's expectations that one has to gobble up all of this technical complexity. And to get back to your question, I think that we've had a circuit breaker of relationship over the last wee while. That's my appraisal of it. That there's people in amongst the team that I think that we've got a good feel to at least get a sense that what we're saying is going to be captured. And that's just happened recently. If you would have asked me this question 12 months ago, would have been probably doing the haka. But I get a real good sense that things have changed amongst the relationship with each other. And it's probably in a test of how the council staff have been able to take on. Particularly, there's been a number of changes happen within key people. I'm talking currently about the role that Mary Ann Baker has, and I just want to acknowledge how I think she's picked it up since Tim's gone on, and she's involved and included mana whenua. We're now in a different space. You know, at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that the outcome to the draft plan is one that shows a measure of upward aspiration. You know, these things won't take 10 years to fix, but if at least the things that we would like to see inside the draft plan show that we're lifting the bar, that we're able to say, let's aspire to this outcome, it ain't going to be done in 10 years. And these are the sorts of messages that I'm having to communicate back to our folk as tangata whenua, because we're spread right across that whole sector. We're spread in terms of economic, social, as well as the cultural, environmental things that we feel. So I hope that's from me and my perception of how I see our relationship with Inside Tank. And I thank you for asking that question, because I think it's important. You may be hearing other things from other people, but I'm right in the lion's den, and that's how I see it.
You are the lion.
Oh.
Fenton, very good.
Got it. Just in regard to civil defence, Marei, and I agree, it does make eminent sense to transfer the whole lot to the regional council, but the 19% rate increase or thereabouts, 5% or thereabouts is civil defence, and the way it's sitting at the moment with the territorials seemingly reluctant to lower their cost, it becomes a net increase in price to civil defence. Do you still support it if that's the take?
To be quite frank and honest, I really didn't go into the numbers. I saw that number pop up as an increase on our rates, but I didn't realise how that would play out, particularly with the territorials and their lack of contribution, if that's what I'm hearing. We've taken a very particular interest as to civil defence overall. Quite honestly, as I've been sitting back in my office, just seeing how this civil defence emergency management has been kind of floating around and who's picking it up and who's actually grasped it has been quite interesting over the last 4 or 5 years. That I think that there is a central role, albeit that it's going to take a little bit extra cost if that's going to be now inherited, as we've supported in our submission to Council, that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council do pick up on this. We place it in my office as a high priority that we would certainly like to get alongside of whatever body there may be in order to have the conversation with regards to our particular community of interest. But fundamentally, I do realise that 19-cent increase, the increase that's expected out of what we have put into facing our future and the options, I think has to at least expect some kind of cost fix raise somewhere along the way. So, but I fundamentally believe that this is the place by which it should be managed.
Neil.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Marei, tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
Just want to take you to your submission on Hawke's Bay tourism, in which you're suggesting we retain the current status quo in terms of funding for Hawke's Bay tourism, but you've got a caveat in there in regard to Māori tourism. Can you
yes.
Express confidence that Māori tourism will be acknowledged as your request via that mechanism?
Thank you for that question, Councillor. I think that, you know, primarily I've been involved with a number of huge tourist operators, Cape Kidnappers, for example, which has shown a huge turnaround of tourism input as the result of that, with more boats and, of course, going up to the golf course. And I can assure you at that point in time it was a struggle to get that particular matter across the line. But the most important thing that's occurred from that, of course, have been the Māori operators that have emerged from that process. You see, I have a different focus, particularly around Māori tourism, because their unique value proposition is really about our culture. So no one better could be better placed to actually deliver on those sorts of work in that particular sector and industry, and it's for the benefit of our region. I mean, I commend what has happened with Hawke's Bay tourism, but I'm just being pro-Māori, and that I would think that those Māori operators that have that unique value proposition to basically make use of our culture and employ people and make money for this region, I think that needs to be circled, as you rightfully say, as a side caveat to my proposal today.
Thank you, Marei. We're out of time.
Cheers.
You did well, mate.
Kia ora.
Thank you very much for coming along, taking your time.
Excellent.
Thank you. Robyn Gwynn is not here, is he? Oh, yes, so hiding behind. Robyn, the floor is yours. Now, Robyn, because we have so many submissions, we're only having 5 minutes each, and I know that's cruel, but the 5 minutes is yours, and you can leave it for questions, or you can take it all up. It's up to you.
Yes.
Okay. Floor is
Thank
yours.
you.
The clock is on.
It's not cruel, but it's stupid, and it shouldn't have happened. You needed to give 10 minutes. You can't do this in 5 minutes. It's ludicrous to either give us 2 minutes to talk, so there's 3 minutes for questions, or the other way around. It's simply wrong. And my entire submission, in fact, is not going to be about what you've asked us to talk about. It's about what I want to talk about, because this is the only time during the year when I and other members of the society can raise our issues. And I hope you have before you my original submission, not the one that your staff typed out, retyped, but my original one, which starts off with the question of the Four Wellbeings Amendment Act.
Yep.
You have? Good. Because I think actually the single most important thing this council can do this year is push for that to be pushed through. As you will be aware, 7 years ago, for no very good reason, the key four well-beings, social, economic, environmental, cultural, were removed from the Local Government Act, and it's left the whole local government actually in a mess, and the legislation is a mess. And I think that it would be really good if all the councils in Hawke's Bay emphasised to government that this should pass and we should bring them back. On the questions you chose to ask, I'll only comment on the central one, land, water and biodiversity. Yes, we do need to invest more in the environment. But you want both to generally increase our rates and borrow a lot more. And frankly, the detail isn't in the consultation document or in the CEO's otherwise, I thought, really excellent public presentation to justify it. It seems you want an open checkbook, the sort of amounts you are asking for. I would like you to see you in a democratic manner coming back to us and the people saying these are the things we want to do, these are the reasons why they should be done, and we need this money now, rather than asking for an open checkbook. So, in other words, I would like to see more specific and reasoned plans if you want the sort of money you're talking about. But in general, yes, we need to invest more in the environment. The other issue I would like to talk about is the one that was raised by one submitter anyway this morning. I'd hoped to hear him, but apparently your first two speakers didn't turn up this morning. And I imagine they said, well, we've only got 5 minutes, there's no point. But anyway, he was speaking about the local government funding agency scheme. And I think on that one, we need a proper risk assessment and a very specific consultation in an area that's not been raised, and that's to do with the democratic consequence of what you are proposing. Because it's not just an economic matter, there's also a democratic issue. And it hasn't even been raised in the consultation document. But there is a risk, however low you deem the risk to be, of your total inability to represent us. Because if the worst came to the worst, someone would be appointed who would be an overlord over the council. And I don't think it's satisfactory to, however low the risk, to just push that through without giving us a specific chance to comment on it and a discussion of why we should be passing that. So the questions I've been raising in my mind and with you now are to do with democracy. And I think they're significant questions which you need to take on board. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a time for questions. Thank you for being so concise.
Question.
Yes.
Thank you, Robyn. I've got a question I was going to ask to the person about the local government funding. It's all very well to say what the cost of not doing something is, but the cost of doing it, what's the cost of not doing it? So what has been missing from this debate so far is what are the savings to this council, all other councils, by going into the scheme? And I'm the understanding it is many millions of dollars because of the lower interest rate, but we need to qualify that. And the second thing is to put out this bogeyman, this risk about someone being able to come in and take over without question on any issue they wish to, vicariously. But no one says that such a decision is reviewable by the High Court. Now, the High Court's rules are that any such action needs to be proportionate and reasonable. So I would argue there are legal and constitutional safeguards here which have never been identified. So I'd like you to comment on the legal.
Unfortunately, Councillor Barker, you took up 20% of his submission, and he can't comment because he's run out of time.
But I do need to comment on that. You're quite right, Mr. Barker. The problem is these things have not been properly raised. We've simply been told in the document that there's a low risk, and that's only to do with finance. We haven't been given the rest of the stuff at all. So in other words, we've been left in the dark. A bit more came out in the public hearings, that was great, but frankly, there are too many aspects we don't know about. It's not something you need to do this year. I think you should redo the process on this one and come back to us next year, and this time do a proper risk assessment. And if you're right, there's millions of dollars of savings to be had. Let's see the figures.
Thank you, Robyn.
But I did notice that something like 2/3 of the people oppose being a guarantor for the scheme.
Yeah. We also noticed that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Michael Halliday. Oh, welcome, Michael. Michael, you have 5 minutes. I know it's not a long time, mate, but you can use the whole 5 or you can have the questions. It's up to you.
Okay.
And it starts now.
Thank you. Quite coincidentally, actually, I was in here this morning when Garth gave his presentation, and that's all about the background comments that I put on my submission. That's not about me, and what I've achieved. It's about the outstanding people that have helped me achieve that. And they've come out of this building and the previous building. And they're still my good friends, as Garth said. I totally agree with your increased spending in the land management area. The council needs to get back to where it was at the turn of this century when I was shooting around the country a wee bit on land management stuff, and this council was right at the top of the tree. And for various reasons it slipped back, but it needs to get back up there again. I really worry about this 1 billion trees in 10 years thing. I urge you not to get too involved with that. It's the sort of thing that it came with the stroke and the flourish of a ministerial pen, and it can go away pretty quickly with that same manoeuvre. And what made it worse, I got an email this morning that said the chairman of the Forest Owners Association is fully in favour of it. And I thought, well, that's a few alarm bells there, because they're not looking at looking after the back paddock, they're looking at a substantial planting that is commercially viable for them. So I want you to take that on board, please. Urgency is understandable, I get that, but problems aren't fixed quickly. And it can take, even when problems are recognised early, like my grandfather did in the 1930s, still took 2 generations to get somewhere near where we wanted to be. You can't do these things out of farm income quickly. You need to get consultants on board, you need to get bank managers on board doing budgets, because they aren't going to give you money if they can't see it. You're not going to be able to fence 2 sides of a gorge if you're not actually going to get any more income from it. There are a lot of experienced land practitioners out there, land management guys, and I know 1 or 2 of you talking to you, you've touted this idea of an advisory panel, and that doesn't sound very silly to me at all. It's preventing the mistakes, reinventing the mistakes. There are plenty of them out there with tree varieties, sites, all that sort of stuff. And there's a few of us who have been there and made them out of our own checkbooks, and there's no need to make them out of the ratepayer's checkbook. I was a bit miffed reading the summary of my submission, and my questioning of the future farming proposal was somehow interpreted as the fact that I don't agree with sustainable farming. What I was questioning was the raising of a substantial amount of rates for something that hadn't been fully explained to anybody. And to me that's a real problem. especially when ratepayers and industry levy payers already fund research and extension services. And even the Farm Forestry Association now gets an income from the forest industry levy. So there's research going into alternative species, hardwoods, all that sort of thing. And on top of that, the last Sustainable Farming Fund project I was involved in, along with Garth Isles and Dr. Gavin Kenny, about 8 or so years ago, involved interviewing 25 to 30 farmers, and Councillor Lawson was one of them actually, selected at random in the region from Mahia to Parongaho. And it was around how they were adapting to a changing climate. Without exception, they were constantly reviewing stocking rates and ratios, grazing management, fodder cropping, water reticulation, tree planting, waterway management, etc. In other words, they were well aware of building some resilience into their businesses. And I question whether they're seriously being asked to have to pay more now to be taught how to suck eggs by the council. Personally, I think going back to having council staff, as Garth said before, more visible, on farm, and contributing to existing discussion groups, field days, seminars, etc. When I was closely involved in it, we had guys that were on national research committees. Neil Faulkner, Garth Isles, all those guys were involved. And finally, and I can't not say this with a fellow trustee sitting around the table, I fully support funding for the biodiversity Hawke's Bay. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that, Michael. You're really dead on time. You did it well. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay, we have Fred Dryburgh. What is... Fred, you would have heard we have 5 minutes.
Yep,
so
okay.
Use it how you want.
Okay, all right.
Wait a minute.
First of all, I'll put it into context. I did my submission online late one night, so I haven't got a copy in front of me, but I looked over the long-term plan, and I guess some of the key things I wanted to bring out was that, you know, there's that saying that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and the second best time is now. So I actually applaud the regional council for actually finally getting on and doing some stuff that's actually going to support, protect and develop the environment. Another thing is that, you know, when we're looking at creating a sustainable future, there's the economic, social, environmental factors, and I like to see mention of those aspects in the long-term plan, and I think education's vital. If people don't understand the reason for change, then it's very hard for them to make the change. So I really import encouragement and funding, and I think, as the previous speaker mentioned, getting people out there and working alongside people so that they can actually make the change that's needed. It's not going to be easy. I'm actually a manager for a company that operates sustainably. It requires commitment and effort, but it's also a change of mindset. And if you look at sustainability as an investment in the future rather than a cost, then it changes your whole approach to how you do things. But again, I support the council's positive approach at looking to build a sustainable future for our environment. I think I might have gone off on a little tangent, part of my submission, and just about water use. For me, and as an uninformed Joe Public member, you know, I get like my local council saying, hey, you got to look after water, and I'm driving along to work and I get sprayed by some irrigator's water going across the road, and I'm thinking, God, what a bunch of numpties. So, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but, you know, possibly some way of, maybe it's education of me, Joe Public, or maybe it's like actually, you know, charging people for the use of water in a more fair and equitable way, or just explaining how it works. But at the moment, the incentives and the mechanisms it seems a bit incongruous. And if you're looking for a change of behaviour, there needs to be a sense of fairness, I think, in it. The only other thing briefly I want to to mention is that I support council's increased work with Taiwhenua whenua. I think it's vitally important. Doesn't matter whether they're 2% of the local population or 24% as they are in Hawke's Bay. Their rights are enshrined in the Treaty of Waitangi. We've been negligent on this in the past. If we're wanting to build a positive future and build it sustainably, then we really need to commit to it and make an effort. To me, it's not a if, it's a you definitely have to do it. Hawke's Bay tourism, on the one hand, I see the attractiveness of reducing spending there to fund some of these other really good initiatives, but I'm also very wary. I'm not involved in the tourism industry, so I just encourage the councillors to meaningfully engage in the consultation. I think it's great that you're actually having a special forum on that on Wednesday and really openly listen to the people that are involved at the ground level to see what the implications are, because it's always attractive when you think, oh yeah, I can save that money, but sometimes there are downstream consequences that you don't fully appreciate. So that's all, but on the whole, it's the long-term plan got a big thumbs up, put a smile on my face, and I thought, thank God, doing something for our environment, about time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fred. Right, we have time for one question. No? Well, you won their hearts. Thank you very much, Fred.
Cheers.
Really appreciate you coming along, taking your time out of the day.
Cheers.
Jeremy Duningham? Welcome, Jeremy. Will have heard my little lecture on 5 minutes, so take up the whole time if you wish.
I'll be fine.
Okay.
Nā miti o te rā, tātou nā kanohi o rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to make this submission. We have been all our adult lives pragmatic and realistic greenies. We've worked in the private corporate sectors and the viticultural, horticultural, public, voluntary, NGO sectors. We've always acknowledged that as a species we are intrinsically and inexorably entwined with the rest of the natural world, and that affects us just as we affect it. If this stasis gets out of balance by our actions, we have a duty not only to our species but also to the planet which sustains us to attempt to redress the balance when we have the ability and the will and the resources to do this. It needs an alignment of these three vectors to achieve real change, something which doesn't happen too often. The usual scenario is one of battling uphill to try and effect change when such alignments haven't occurred. I've already stated in our written submission that we view the current situation as one of those rare alignments, and so we urge pressing on with all speed to try and cement change for the better into the future. We acknowledge that this will require some sacrifice, some small hardship for most ratepayers, and that this doesn't sit lightly given that so much has been wasted on an all the eggs in one basket approach by a previous council. However, as my fearsome grandmother used to say, you can't cry over spilt milk, and in economic terms that means accepting sunk costs. I trust that the burden of that weighs somewhat heavily on the shoulders of those who promoted such folly. As for the present, it seems pertinent to revisit President Kennedy's famous words in a rather different form. Ask not what the environment can do for you, ask instead what you can do for it. We fully support the Regional Council's LTP and focus. We will bear our burden of the costs willingly and do whatever practicable in our own lives. And we wish all involved kia kaha, be courageous, be strong. We travel with you on this journey. We hope to see steady, measurable and transparent progress on an annual basis. That way, others who are less convinced at present may come to see that it's worthwhile. You only have to look at the history of past societies and civilizations, which have eventually collapsed, to realise that we humans prefer to ignore ever-present warning signs in the forlorn hope the problem will go away. By then it's too late. Here we have an opportunity to try and do it differently. If we begin to succeed, what a message to put out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We really appreciate your support and your submission. Questions, councillors? I think you just captured them.
Great.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Ah, Ngati Pahauwera, eh? Robyn's sitting back there. Welcome, Robyn. Welcome. John.
E te pau o kahuranaki, te reo o Ngati Pahauwera. Tēnei te mihi atu ki a koe, ko tai mai. Me atu au ki a toro I tōna taina mai. Te pauritana ko tai ki Pahauwera, mo te raru ki roto I te urupa. Engari, ka mautu we. Engari, e te whanauna, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koe. Nau mai, piki mai, kake mai.
You're Robyn. Now, you have, because you're such an important chap, you have 10 minutes and you represent a whole group of people in your hapu. So when you're ready to go, we'll press the button.
Press the button?
Okay.
Right. O kia ora tātai. Ai, tika ana, Mike. Tēnei anō, te mihi atu ki a koe, hurino ki a koe tau. I raro I te kaupapa o tēnei o tātou nei rā. I raro anō I te maru o tēnei o tātou nei whare. He hohonu te kaupapa, e nari, e poto te wā. Nō reira nungi tērā me mihi atu ki a koutou. I raro anō I te manaakitanga te mea ngara. Nō reira mihi atu ki ora tātou. Look, I've just come to indeed make a short presentation, and I was aware that Toro has been here earlier in regards to Māori tourism. But I did want to come along and talk on behalf of the Ngati Pahauwera Development Trust, and I've just got a brief slide there that we are a settlement entity in the Ngati Pahauwera Mohaka Raupunga area, and as the saying goes, he mano kahawai te mona, and that means that there is an aspiration to have as many kahawai in the sea as possible, and that refers to the saying of our people that we are well-dispersed people throughout the country, and our aspiration is to ensure that we have a positive influence wherever our people are. So that saying sort of opens it up. And in terms of who we are, and I've just referred to, we are a treaty settlement entity, and we've got in excess of 7,000 members that affiliate to our trust. It's an acknowledged Crown area between Waihua and Waikare, but naturally, as Mike points out, our whakapapa, our genealogical ties extend the area from Wairau, Mahia, right down to Porongahau, where Mike resides and comes from. So we are bound throughout the region. In terms of that, I've put a copy of the Taku Taiwhenua application. We are one of the first here that are likely to get recognised for customary title. I say that in the sense that the Crown acknowledged our title, albeit for the mean high and low water mark, but what we applied for is indicated in the slide or paper in front of you. Having said that, as I say, the Crown acknowledged that we do have customary marine title, albeit for the wet spot or wet strip for that area. Now that'll go before the High Court anyway, but that demonstrates that as a trust, we do have recognised customary rights per the legislation, and part of being involved and coming along and talking to these processes about that statutory recognition. We have an asset base of in excess of $50 million. We are involved in forests, and our partner in crime, PAMPAC, we own the forest, or part of their forests, and of course on licence, but over 30 years in time that licensing expires, and essentially that will be forests that will either be jointly or solely managed by ourselves. And we also have our own farms, so we're involved in forests, we are involved in farms, and we like to ensure that our interests are being protected through the long-term plan, because if it isn't considered in the plan, then the resourcing that is required to go along with that may not necessarily follow. So hence the need to come along and express our support for the long-term plan. We also have land-based management systems underway in the Mohaka forest, and that's because we do have a sense of obligation to our whenua, and we don't, well, our members do not necessarily agree with Aerial 1080 dropping. Now, I know there's science and we can argue the logistics of some of that and the practicality, but in terms of that, a practical step was for us to have our own land-based trapping operations in our own forest, and we've successfully been able to do that along in the partnership with TB Osprey. So in regards to that, as I say, our trust does concentrate and has a focus on sustainable management in the environment. Similarly, we are economic, we are social, we are cultural, we are everything, and we're keen on investing in areas for sustainable development. We also are a credible partner, and we want to achieve the mutual aspiration for sustainability, economic and social development going forward. So I just wanted to put that in the front. And normally, I know we've come here to talk about the long-term plan, but normally entities like ourselves have to fit within other people's plans and frameworks and how they think and how they do things, and that's fine, we understand that. But I wanted to put across this was our 100-year plan, and to show that what you're planning fits within our plan. So this is the 100-year plan that we as a trust are aspiring to and working towards, and then it fits into a 5-year plan at the back there, where we have endorsed some of the areas that the council are looking to get specific support or otherwise upon. So in terms of our mission, one of our great spiritual leaders, the canon Heretaunga, had a saying, ko te amarangi ki mua, ko te hāpai o ki muri, te tūturitanga mahi pono o te mana Māori motu hake. And really it is let God be the spearhead, and good things shall follow, and that is the true practice of Maridom. So, I mean, if you research those words, there might be a better explanation of that, but as I say, it's a spiritual base, and good things will follow, and that is what true Maridom is about. In terms of our first goal is toi tū te Pahauwera. I mean, that's about ensuring that our culture, our tikanga and our kawa is steadfast and strong. In terms of goal 2, te puawaitanga o Pahauwera tanga is to ensure that wherever we are, we accept the social responsibility and lead in our communities. So with that, sometimes we are leading the wrong things and the wrong people maybe, but as I say, we are trying to ensure that where our people are, we take responsibility for our communities. Goal 3, toi tū te whenua. We want to be the owners in the kaitiaki of Pahauwera lands, as that extends. And toi tū te whairawa is to be the wealth creators and the business owners and global importers and exporters. So that's to demonstrate that we aren't here to pick apples, we're here to build orchards and to be part of the management of that industry. So our trust looks to create the entrepreneurial spirit of Marei that once existed, rather than be the labour force for the different industries. That's not to say that's not important, it's just to say that the focus of our trust is to create the entrepreneurial spirit of Marei. So in terms of the alignment with Ngati Pahauwera's 5-year plan, and you're more than welcome to visit our website and have a look at that plan, but the first thing is around good governance, and you had as part of that working with tangata whenua. So essentially we naturally support option 2, and that's to grow and increase investment in partnership with tangata whenua. Now, many of the territorial land authorities struggle with how this is, and particularly it's difficult with the number of entities that you have here in Hawke's Bay. And all we can say is that active participation should be an integral consideration, and it shouldn't be an afterthought, and it requires investment and effective relationships. I think you're working towards that anyway. So as I say, as part of our good governance, as I say, this is under our planning. We see that as an important aspect. Social responsibility, again, this is from our 5-year plan. In terms of civil defence, you know, we support civil defence where it works most effectively. Now, we don't, if you can demonstrate the existing is not effective, otherwise, you know, we retain the status quo. And having said that, if it is for transfer to HBRC, then what we do support is Marei utilisation as civil defence options, provided the Marei are resourced. So one of our Marei is identified as a civil defence spot, particularly in Mohaka if there's slips and so forth. So there are other Marei well placed, but sometimes there's just an expectation that those facilities are available and they aren't resourced. We believe they should be in the event that there is a particular event that they are equipped to actually cope with it rather than just make ends meet. In terms of environmental accountability, land, water and biodiversity, we support the accelerated uptake of option 2. And we have a saying, ko au te awa, ko te awa ko au, and you know, the river is us and we are the river. So consequently, any accelerated program that enhances waterway management is supported by our trust, and that's been demonstrated with our own efforts to try and riparian plant and fence off waterways that we did as part of our settlement as well. In terms of,
I'm afraid we've done the 10 minutes, Robyn.
All right, I'm nearly there.
You're nearly
Rex.
there. Maybe just do that last one.
Yes. Just, no, I do want to just sort of, because we did say 15 minutes on my letter.
Oh, did it?
All right, all I'm saying is that for Partnerships for Change, we support option 2, and that Marei farmers, we are Marei farmers and we want to be involved. The local funding, government funding agency, you know, business rationale prevails there, the best rates for the best efforts. In terms of Hawke's Bay and Marei tourism, we do not support option 2 to reduce investment in tourism, but rather we support the investment in Hawke's Bay Marei tourism and support the investment in an indigenous component through the region and develop the Marei, and I say in brackets, and early settler cultural heritage that is lost and sometimes uncelebrated history of the region. So other areas have embraced and actively celebrate Marei and early settler history. So our wāhi taonga, our wāhi tapu, lakes, rivers and mountains are culturally and economically valuable.
Thank you, Robyn. I'm really sorry that it says 20 minutes on your letter. It says 10. You have me on, aren't you? Winding me up.
It worked. Sorry, I didn't have my glasses in. The zero
didn't
looked
have your
like
glasses
in.
You owe me
Thanks,
one,
Rex.
mate. You owe me one. It worked all right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, not
Thank
all
you,
of it,
Councillor.
but most of it.
Time for questions, Simon.
No, now, John, you're on. It's your team. You're not going to do that to me, are you, John?
Because he got 5 minutes.
No, you got 10.
No, but we were given 5. I'll take 10, but I'm not.
You don't need 10,
No,
John.
you're 10. We would never give you just
don't need-
the whole of Cranford just 5. You're 10.
Well, I'm pleased it saved me having to say it.
So,
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've only got a 5-minute presentation, so it'll give you time for questions.
John, I know you for many years, and you will take more than 5.
I might not. I might prove you wrong. Okay, thank you very much. Where we wanted to start basically was that these,
John, have you got a presentation?
yeah, there's 5 overheads. And we'll put them up a bit later. I'll just get into the start of this. Just to remind you, for those of you who were councillors at the time, we presented to the Regional Council a little over 3 years ago to tell you that the existing Cranford couldn't continue where it is, and that therefore we're alerting you to the fact that we were going to embark on a process of finding a new home, and that would ultimately lead to a building project. You unanimously voted and appointed Fenton Wilson to liaise with that on that project. And then what happened is, in the middle of it all, as we were starting to move, Presbyterian support who own Cranford, right out of the blue, came to us and said, we don't want to own Cranford anymore. We're prepared to hand all the assets over to 2 community trusts, one of which is called the Cranford Hospice Trust, which is the operating arm of the hospice. That's what it does. It provides the palliative care. Anyone you know goes in there, they get looked after by the Cranford Trust. We as the foundation own the assets. We own the real estate, we own the investment capital and various other bits and bobs, intellectual property and so on. And so the process of the handover and setting up those 2 trusts, so both trusts are representatives of the community. The community owns Cranford, not us. We're just trustees. And we got possession of those assets and the ability to operate independently from the 1st of July last year. That process took 15 months and stalled us a bit. But in the meantime, we were looking for property, looked at a number of them, and as I guess you're all aware, it's been well publicised. The Fernie Trust came to us and we went to them and so on, and have offered us the homestead block, nigh on 15 acres, the 6 hectares of the homestead block at Chester Hope Station, halfway between Hastings and Napier, on Chester Hope Road, off Pahauwera Road. Having done the deal with them to get ownership of that property, which we still don't have because the ownership is conditional on resource consent, which we can't get until we've finished the plans which are underway for the new hospice. But nonetheless, they're giving us that site free of charge, a remarkably generous gesture, as was PSEC's one. So we will have ownership of that, we anticipate, by October and November this year. And to that end, we've been dealing with the Hastings Council at great length, and the Mayor and the Council, as with Central Hawke's Bay, are all out on the site this Friday, again. Hastings and Napier are working collaboratively on the site, and we're employing but free of charge. We're not paying for Napier City Council's arborist team to supervise the remedying of the gardens. Now, we will give you at the end of this presentation, we'll give you an article written in 1954 explaining the garden at Chester Hope. And if you're interested in gardens, it's a good read. If you're not, don't bother, But it's a fascinating article. That garden out there is priceless. There was 1 tree out there, of which there's only 3 in the world. It was planted by Kew Gardens in 1910. Who sailed out here to do it. And nobody in Hawke's Bay has ever been in there because Joan Fernie didn't like people. So that solved that. The quickest way to get rid of people was not let them in. About the only one who knows it well is Ngahiwi, who she fired because he licked the sheep when he was shearing it. So we're meeting again with Ngahiwi on Friday.
Check that.
What? It's a true story. And anyway, so what we're coming to the regional... What we've done since we got ownership, we've done presentations from Wairoa to Waipakarau, to the communities, to the medical professions. We've done 2 presentations to all the neighbours in Pakawai. We have had 100% buy-in to this project. We are now commencing on our fundraising, which Jenny and the Giblin Group are undertaking collaboratively with us. To raise the money to build this new hospice, and we intended to make it the most important project this community, greater community, has seen in a long, long time. We want complete community buy-in, right from the kids who sell bags of feijoas outside their front door to people who are philanthropists, and we need the support of councils, both because of your role in terms of representing your community and the betterment of your community, but also because of what we can create with this magnificent site. We can create the best hospice, I advisedly say, in the world, because I haven't been in them all, but the garden gives us, and we have to preserve the garden and enhance the garden. Hastings Council have insisted on it as a community asset, which the community will have access to, in terms of satisfying the planning needs on the plain zone. So that's basically where we're at. So to date, 100% buy-in. We've commissioned Feldspar from Dunedin, who specialise in medical facilities as project managers. HDT from Napier are the architects. Every specialist consultant and subcontractor is from Hawke's Bay. Giblins are doing the funding together with Ray McKim, who's over there, and myself, and David Compton, who's our general manager, and a few others. And so we're into it. What we are asking you for, you have one element of an area of responsibility in respect of the property, whereby it has flowing through it. The water feature is something called the Awahau stream. So that's kind of yours in terms of the jurisdiction. And on the boundary of it is the Tutaikuri Waimati. So you come into play, and so regional council cannot avoid being involved. We're in a 4-year project where our current plan is that we will finish construction in December 2020, and that Cranford, because you can't just move in 24 hours, not a hospice, will be in residence on that site and operating fully from March 21. And we see this as being far more than the existing Cranford. It'll be a community hub, apart from the palliative care, for a whole lot of associated health things such as early onset Alzheimer's, perhaps, day clinics, which are not available to people who need cancer treatment, and things like that. All sanctioned, voted for unanimously by the DHB, and so that's where we're at. So what we are asking you to do, if at all possible, it is possible, so we won't say at all possible, what we are asking of the Regional Council today is that you endorse the motion you put 3 years ago, update, if necessary, who we need to liaise with to go through a consultative process in terms of this project, which is terribly important to this community, and the time frame on it is 4 years. We're not looking at anything in one particular year. Okay, so we're doing all our any funding component, but there will be the need for resource consent, and we will have to come to you about the waterways because they need a bit of work, quite frankly, and you've got so that's a service provision. Okay, so that's where we're at. We'll just show you these. That's the existing Cranford, no longer fit for purpose. 8 rooms, only one's got an ensuite. Noisy. Annual maintenance costs are about 130,000 just to keep it painted and working, and totally unsuitable for modern clinical practice. And the Turley report of 2012 said, you've got to get out. Okay, next one. Just an architect's impression of looking out to the lawn in the garden at Chester Hope. There's huge magnolia trees and all beautiful there. Just an idea of the sort of thing we're looking at. Next one. Okay, there's the Awahau stream running down at the northern end, just there, the darker green bits, an ornamental vine over a weir. So that flows through the property, and the bottom slide would be, if you turn this way, that bridge there we call the Marei Bridge. That was again designed by Kew Gardens, and it was where Joan Fernie used to feed the eels from, and that's going to be completely rebuilt as it is. You know, it's quite a feature of the property to have that. So there's one of the waterways. We've got one more. And the benefits of council investing. Social and cultural benefit from investing in a community facility, which every single person in this community gets touched by at some point in their life. Building community resilience, an opportunity to meet our community's growing and changing needs, and region-wide cooperation and working together for a common community good.
Thank you, John.
That's me. Any questions?
No time for questions.
Haven't you got one?
I have one, but
Go.
I'm not allowed to give it. No, thanks. So we need to move on because we're really tight. I'm going to ask you a question when I see you at the Hastings Boys High School rugby, mate.
I went to Hastings Boys High School rugby 2 Saturdays ago to see you and Rick and neither of you were there.
I know.
They were playing St Pat's Orchestra.
I know. Linda's Farm on Saturday. Linda's Farm on Saturday.
I actually went over there to watch Napier play St
Thank you,
Pat's
Ray,
there.
for your contribution to this too. Is that Jenny there?
Jenny's with us.
I know.
Tony Smith, yeah, St Hook Trust.
Right. Oh, sorry about that. Tony, sustainable.
I promise to talk fast if you'll listen fast, and I'll be over in 7 minutes.
Yeah, well, you have 10, so
That one there, the left hand.
if you can do 7, we would really appreciate it.
Okay, so thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me in advance. Okay, so the Sustaining Hawke's Bay Trust, briefly first who we are. A charitable organisation, been around since 1991. We operate the Hawke's Bay Environment Centre, which is based in Hastings. Nationwide links to a number of similar groups, Environment Hubs Aotearoa, the Zero Waste Network, the Community Energy Network. We're quite small, 1 equivalent full-time staff, but that's 3 people working part-time, 45 or so volunteers active at any one time, 700 odd people on our mailing list, email list. And we're funded by a range of organisations, as you see there. We do have worked at times with the Regional Council as well on things like litter clean-up and those sorts of events. We will be particularly focusing in the future on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which have been built into government policy and the part of the Greens-Labour agreement. So that will be a key focus for us, and I'm sure for you going forward. So what do we do? All sorts of stuff around sustainability. I've been involved in the environmental movement since the early 1970s. I wished we'd invented the word sustainability about 20 years ago. It just captures everything so well. It is not environmental, it is not economic, it is not social, it is not cultural, it's all of them. And if we don't meet all of them, we're not staying here in a sustainable state. So, lovely word. Retail and advice and services, we do electronic waste recycling, other specialist recycling, we run zero waste events, and I'll talk about one of those a bit more in a second. We run backyard type projects. We work with schools, doing things like worm farms, litter education, litter and so forth in schools. We do clean-up events and we run workshops. In all of this, we're working with a 3-part activity. We're trying to inform people, get knowledge, get understanding about the environment, about waste, about energy. As a consequence of that, we're seeking to get people to make a commitment and have some motivation to doing things a bit better. And then we're there with the means to help them do that. So a little example of that. I don't know how many of you were at the International Marathon just over a week ago. We were there with our bins. So what are we doing? I'm standing behind a bin. So there's the bins. That's the facilitation. Because now you can put your compost in that one. You can put your plastic in that one. So that's facilitation. What am I doing? I'm chatting to people and telling them, well, of course, that's compostable. Next time you buy a takeaway coffee, make sure it's a compostable cup. Ask the retailer. So there we are educating, and hopefully in the middle of all that somewhere we're getting a commitment. Not just a commitment to put their compost in the rubbish that day in the right place, but to go home and do it. So that's just a little microcosm. Everything that we do here has got those 3 threads in it. So what have we done? Well, just some snapshots in the last year, just some numbers for you. I know people like numbers. I'm a mathematician myself by first training. Over a tonne of batteries. But recycling batteries is not easy for a normal household. Right? No one collects them at your gate, so you put them in the rubbish. Right? We have a specialist service, a tonne of batteries. Just imagine that. We have recycled over 2,500 items of electronic waste. Maybe a television set or a printer or whatever else. These are large numbers. We've got 46 worm farms active in schools around Hawke's Bay. What do those kids learn? We've run a whole series of workshops with a range of participants, and we've taken place in some build-up events. So that's who we are and what we do. Now the boring bit. Our submission. This is very boring, honestly, because fundamentally we say, you've got it right. I'd like to expand a little bit on some of those, a little bit of detail. So land, water and biodiversity, option 2 all the way. This needs urgent change. Regulation, partnerships, facilitation. No one of them is going to work on its own rapidly enough. We've got to do all of that stuff. We've got to really get stuck into it and make it work. The future farming option. Obviously, once again, we've got to be working with the people who are on the ground, the people with skin in the game, as they say, and we've got to be right there alongside them, working with improvement in partnership and facilitation. Pest control is mentioned in there as well, and we also underline how important that is. Sustainable homes we see as a social arm to what's happening here. It's a no cost to the council. We see this as a huge part of improving the sustainable lot of every household potentially in the region. Civil defence is, to be honest, a matter of efficiency and common sense to centralise that function. We think that makes a great deal of sense. Working with tangata whenua is a matter of social justice. For some reason that's been got wrong in terms of resourcing for quite a while, and it's about time we got that right. So once again, we see that as a bit of a no-brainer. Tourism, a tricky one. Let me say right away, I do not, and we do not regard tourism as in any way in conflict with sound environmental values and sustainability. Like any other industry, well-run and well-managed tourism is quite compatible with a strong infrastructure and a sustainable environment. But that's true of dairy farming, grape growing. It's true of all of those. It's a matter of balance. How much support do we give? How much support don't we give? Right? And being a matter of balance, you can argue for any point on the spectrum. We think you got it about right. Drop the level back to where it was. It's had a bit of a boost. That boost will be ongoing. Yeah, we think you've got that about right. And the funding option, again, largely a technical issue. We accept your analysis and we support your conclusions as a result. We do, however, have a couple of things that we'd like to maybe see made a bit more of in your long-term plan. Not surprisingly, perhaps we see education as a huge contributor. To go with your partnerships and your regulation, a greater level of understanding and awareness will always provide a better context. And we're not talking education in schools, we're talking education of the community by and large. So we'd like to see perhaps a little bit more emphasis on that and a little bit more emphasis on some of the science that goes behind that education. It's in there, it's in the plan, it's just maybe not quite as high a priority as we would like to see it. And we think it's an issue of coordination as well. We're very aware of what's going on in the not-for-profit sector in areas relating to sustainability. Now, sustainability, remember, a huge raft. So we're talking social agencies, we're talking Nourish for Nil, we're talking Forest and Bird. I have no idea how many organisations there are in Hawke's Bay who are active somewhere in that space, all doing a grand job of what they're doing. But are they doing it as well as they could? We believe that there would be huge benefit across the effectiveness of this sector with a genuinely good level of coordination, good information about who's doing what and where they are. Another little example. We're in the process of, we've applied for some funding from ECA to buy ourselves a new van, a lovely little electric van. So watch this space for us buzzing around in our electric van. Our use of that is probably a day a week. What should it do the other 4? Sit in our garage? Of course it shouldn't. 4 other organisations or more should be using it. Who? How might they use it? How can they do it in a way which adds value to us? So we believe there's a huge potential here. And we look at the model, which I don't know myself, but I've been told about in Bay of Plenty, where the local environment hub, Bay of Plenty, has a role supported and funded by the regional council to coordinate a whole range of not-for-profit organisations to maintain the database, to establish the links so that everybody knows who is who. So we are keen to be part of the solutions to both of those and happy to talk with the regional council about what our role might be going forward. There we go. You've got it right. Be strong. Kia kaha. Go forward from here. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tony. You were 8.
8.
Damn. So we have a couple of. We actually don't have. We have just over a minute for a question. Do we have any questions?
Then I will. It's a sideline question, but where can I dump batteries? Because we save them in a pile and they're really hard to get rid of.
About 809 Karamu Road, North Hastings.
Thank you.
You do a wonderful job. There's no doubt about it. You do.
Yeah.
And well done. And I think everyone really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
And keep it up. Keep it up.
Good luck.
Thank you. Okay, we have now Terry, Environmental Forum. I think. Welcome, Terry. Oh, and you have an old friend alongside you, I see.
Oh, good.
This is the old, more familiar. Not old.
So now you have 10 minutes, so you can use the whole lot, or you can wait for questions, whatever.
No, we don't intend to use a whole lot. We'd rather have some time for questions and discussion if you have some. So,
well, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present here today. I'm representing, along with John Chin, to Taiao Hawke's Bay Environment Forum. We're a diverse group, an umbrella organization primarily. What we do have in common, all of us, is the fundamental belief that the natural environment is a real foundation for our social, cultural, and economic well-being, and so that's where we all come together on that one. So, we'll take that you've read the submission, so I'm not going to go back and repeat a lot of the things. There's 3 key points. On my age, I better put these on. 3 key points that we want to emphasize today. The first one is we congratulate the council on what we believe in general to be a good draft long-term plan. We support your realignment of priorities to allow more urgent action to address the environmental degradation that has occurred over many decades. The Regional Council needs to focus on its core business of protecting and enhancing the environment. Therefore, we support the reduced contribution to Hawke's Bay tourism, and we support the shifting of the economic development rate from mainly residential and rural to mainly commercial and industrial. We support the recognition in the strategic planning group of activities that the environment is a platform on which the present and future depend. This is the only viable way to look to the long term, we believe. Therefore, we support the redevelopment of resources from economic development to more sustainability focus. And we support the sentiments regarding community engagement and participation presented in the governance and partnership group of activities. The second main point we want to make is we believe the performance targets in general could be a bit stronger as they don't adequately reflect the sustainability focused advanced in the draft plan. For example, we would like to see some environment-specific performance targets under Integrated Catchment Management Group of Activities. Is what we're doing working for the environment? Is our environment improving as a result of our efforts? Further, we note there is nothing in the performance targets to indicate whether community engagement and participation has been or is being effective. Performance targets in this group need to be more than just a box-ticking exercise. Are the engagement and participation efforts actually working? I think it's important to have performance targets that we can use to reflect that. The third point that we want to make, and it's probably our only real sort of major criticism of this draft LTP, is that we note there is no mention of climate change in the transport group of activities. In our mind, this is a serious oversight, given that road transport is the second largest contributor to New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions. Regional land transport planning needs to give much greater attention to ensuring that sustainable modes of transport are more attractive, safe, convenient, and comfortable. Taiao strongly encourages the introduction of electric buses and the necessary infrastructure as soon as possible, and funding for this should be allocated in the 2018 long-term plan. Finally, in conclusion, we accept that sustainability means that we all need to make some adjustments to how we live our day-to-day lives. Some of the biggest adjustments will be around how we view and use water. While the proposed long-term plan makes a start to the incentives and rules that are needed to make these happen, we believe that the increased boldness will be required over the coming decade to help all of us make the necessary transitions, and in particular to help land users make the transitions they need to make. We need to start these transitions now, not in 3 years or 5 years. The long-term plan needs to strongly signal the required changes we all will need to make, particularly regarding water use and our transport choices. And just finally, again, we congratulate the council and the staff on putting together what we feel is a good long-term plan, and with just a few minor changes, I think we'd be quite happy to support it wholeheartedly. So, thank you.
Thank you.
We're happy to answer
Thank
any
you, Terry.
questions.
John, do you wish to say anything?
No, there's nothing more I can add here, just there might have been some of the questions that I could have helped with.
Okay. Right, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just like to confirm that I had nothing to do with your the comments in your plan around targets and performance, but can I ask?
Confirmation.
Can I ask at the bottom of your submission, no performance targets for biodiversity? Can you suggest some performance targets for biodiversity?
Probably turn this over to John, because he's, if you don't mind, John, he's got more expertise in the biodiversity area than I have. So.
I can't see which bit of the submission you're referring to, but that's all right. Just on the biodiversity strategy, it might please you to know it was actually Taiao Hawke's Bay Environment Forum about 5 years ago came beating to the table here, pleading that the council prepare a biodiversity strategy. Personally, and the rest of the group are absolutely wrapped in what's been achieved and the magnificent leadership role that the regional council's taken in that. There's a small function this evening at Havelock which we'll probably catch up on, but well done, team. It's been a long, hard road, but I think collectively we've got there. In terms of performance targets, I'm not having seen the most recent documentation coming out of the working group. I'm sure, Terry, that there's enough competent people on that group there that will ensure that the performance targets are well described and well meaningful.
What I see where you the bit we have in brackets there. It's just there in all the tables under your groups of groups of activities document or whatever, I forget what it's called exactly, but you have performance targets for a range of things, but they're missing in the biodiversity section. At least they were missing at the time we put the submission in, and that's why I put this here, is that we just didn't see any. So that's why it's there, and I think it's just an oversight, or it's the way the table came out, or something like that.
Okay, any more questions? Yep. Oh, Alan?
Just to make a comment, in relation to your transport suggestions, the regional land transport plan is under review at the moment, and it's required to take into account the new government's government policy statement on transport, which really is quite transformational, and its objectives are directed towards minimising single occupant motor cars, promoting public transport, mode neutrality, rail and road, and a lot of it goes towards the objectives that you've set out there.
Okay. Yep.
I'll make sure your comments are passed on.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Terry and John. I just want to say you guys do a fantastic job out there, and
thank you.
John has come in. He's been regularly nagging away at us, and hopefully you're finally getting your own way on a whole lot of raft of issues.
It's all good stuff. Exciting times.
Okay,
There's
thanks, guys.
certainly progress that we see, so it's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is exciting times. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Donna.
You're missing.
Welcome, Donna. Good to see you, and it's good to see you, wee, over there.
Te tino puti o Ngati Pro, ka nui te ko ki te tiahia nei. Nō reira, hara mai piki mai kōrua ko tō tāne, ko tai mai ki te takoto, tō koutou kaupapa ki rongi te tepu. Engari e taku pānui tia te pepa, ka nui ngā whakahea o tēnei komiti. Kei te pai rātou kia whakarongo ai, no reira, tautoko ana hau, tēnā koe, tēnā kōrua. Kia ora no tātou.
Mike. Kia ora tātou, everyone.
Donna, you have 5 minutes and you can use the whole 5 talking, or you can wait for questions. It's up to you.
I've just got 2 points to make.
Okay, well, you tell us when you want to go.
Okay, I'll just make a couple of statements first.
Okay.
Because I've changed my mind since I wrote my submission. I wrote in because I strongly support the withholding of some funds from Hawke's Bay tourism. And part of the reason is because they're an anachronism. You know, 1968 was the last year that Māori was forbidden to be spoken in schools. And I think a lot of the way they operate is like they're still back in 1968. The website, there's 150 members of Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism. There are 3 of them in their website. The front page of it is privileging white people. There's not a single Māori anything, not a single Māori word. And, you know, I just think they lack the cultural capacity. So that was my initial thought. However, husband and I go to Auckland every couple of months to Whāriki, which is the Auckland Tourism Event and Economic Development Agency, who hold these events for Māori businesses to come together. And they really are superb. But what I like about the ATID model is that it focuses on making Auckland a better place to live and to work and to do business in. It has a very developmental focus. It's very proactive in the way that it supports businesses, in particular Māori businesses. When they first got going, they did an international and domestic visitor survey, and of a whole range of things that visitors wanted to see. The top 2 were, 1, the Waitemata Harbour and to get out on it, and the second one was authentic Māori cultural experiences. So they've written a strategic plan that incorporates that into every level of it. So they are actively working towards achieving authentic Māori experiences for their international visitors in particular. Such a strategy is missing from Hawke's Bay. Now, my second point, Rex, my thinking is Hawke's Bay needs a body that doesn't just focus on tourism, but in fact focus on economic development. It might be, you know, technology, it might be anything, but not just tourism in isolation. And I think, you know, it privileges certain providers, wineries and whatnot, but we have to take a broader view. Now, husband and I were the first project managers for Te Matatini 2017, where 19,000 ticket holders came here, spent an average $785 a head each, brought in 11.8 million into our economy. 70% of them said they would come back to another such event in Hawke's Bay. That's how much they loved it. The evaluation report showed that Matatini Hawke's Bay got the highest satisfaction rating of any matatini ever in the history, 9.2. That and the kapahaka groups that stayed on the marae, it also got the highest rating for the levels of manaakitanga, that is the way that people were looked after. The evaluation report said in Hawke's Bay there is a role for such an event of kapahaka. Now, you know, our daughters with Māori television, and she was telling us that Christchurch had 1 million views of Matatini, 1 million views, and that is not just of the kapahaka, but of Christchurch and what was happening there. And it didn't quite double, but the views that went out to 52 countries around the world watched the streaming of Matatini, and you know the interest in kapahaka is huge. And, you know, we've got an opportunity in Hawke's Bay to brand Hawke's Bay, not just wine country, but wine country with an authentic Māori experience. Auckland cannot do it. They're trying their best, but they can only stage stuff. Rotorua can't do it. Tamaki tours, you go to a hall. Mitai village, you go off to a little village that they've created. In Hawke's Bay, we have authentic marae who provide authentic Māori experiences. And, you know, it's a little gem. It's like our red wine. The world doesn't know about it, but we've got to get that message out. And I think you pair our wineries and our incredibly world-class wines with our fabulous fresh food, our indigenous kai, which Ngati Kahungunu are famous for, and their ability to provide authentic marae experiences up and down. I mean, there are over 70 marae in this rohe. Anyhow, you know,
just about out of time, but
if I just finish on this note, you know, this is a sunrise industry tourism. We're going to hit the $1 billion by 2024, but we can do better. And I think if we really open our arms up to the whole Māori component, we can make Hawke's Bay really special.
Thank you, Donna. You did really well in a tight time frame. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Wee. Okay, Nick, welcome. What have you got in that bag, Nick? You have 10 minutes, Nick. You can juice it all up.
No problem. We'll see how we go.
Okay.
Kia ora koutou. Take the submission as read, and I just want to draw your attention to two main features. The first one is really in the sustainable housing area. As many of you will recall, at the last LTP we drew attention to the housing problems in Hawke's Bay, and as a result reignited the Housing Coalition with Liz assisting there, chairing in the initial stages. One of the issues we've uncovered is that we don't actually have a discretionary fund for actually executing projects under the banner of the Housing Coalition. The District Health Board has allocated funding for that, with the idea being that it was matched by funds from other partners in the coalition. We have got some proposals on the table. Some of those were included as actions under the social inclusion strategy, and those are to really assess the housing demand, housing need, particularly for affordable and social housing in Hawke's Bay, and to put together a plan to deal with that. And the second one was really around looking at partnering with Habitat for Humanity to put in place some programs that will assist whānau to deal with the maintenance and repair issues in homes. So those projects are on the table in front of the Coalition at the moment, and what I'm seeking today is so that some of that funding that you're setting aside for your sustainable housing actually is diverted to a discretionary fund that the Coalition can support. So the second one I wanted to mention was really in the drinking water area, and that's, you know, we obviously appreciate the massive investment Council's planning to make in that area. Just wanted to draw your attention to the work that the Joint Working Group is doing at the moment, developing some draft provisions aimed specifically at protecting drinking water sources in the tank plan change. And we're obviously still working through that at the moment. We have a consultant coming in, working with JWG on a set of suite of provisions that might be introduced into tank. We are concerned that there may be some costs associated with introduction of those measures. They might extend to changing what is largely a regulatory regime of permitted activity rules to one that requires that has triggers for consents being required for some of those more high-risk activities in drinking water source catchment zones. And there may very well need to be more monitoring done. There may very well need to be some incentives to assist people to transition from particular land uses to lower risk land uses in those high-risk areas where we're drawing our drinking water from. So we think it would be wise to target some funding for that work over the next few years. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Nick. Questions for Nick? Yes, Peter.
Yeah, hi Nick, and thanks for your submission. I happened to be listening to the radio yesterday, and they were talking about a grant of $135 million that the government's putting aside through the EECA for home insulation. So it seems to me that there's a number of entities that are working in this general area of sustainable homes. Is there scope for us to somehow better integrate those things through some sort of combined effort here?
I think there is, absolutely. My understanding is that the Matariki structure is still predominantly focused on economic development, but it is extending now into social inclusion, and there are some specific actions related to housing in that. If we were able to utilise that structure in some way, that would be potentially, I think, a vehicle. But the Housing Coalition is already there. We're not talking about, I mean, the services will continue to access those grants from ECA and so on, and we'll continue to utilise those. But what we're talking about are projects that are specific to Hawke's Bay that we've identified as priorities, that we can get some good health outcomes in housing at a relatively low cost. So we're not talking about big investment. It's about a relatively small amount. I think it was 60,000 was the amount that we were looking for from respective agencies.
So, Paul, I'm just a little bit confused when you talk about housing improvements. What do you actually mean by that?
So if you've got, so the way this is working at the moment is our child health housing team are getting referrals from the hospital for families where the child has come into a hospital with an illness that's associated with crowding or the state of the housing. They're assessing the risk in that, and they're attempting to refer those families through to various social agencies, and at times they will be working with the landlord to try and deal with some of the maintenance issues. It's fair to say that the interventions available to them at the moment are extremely limited, and the budgets for those are extremely limited. So just for example, they need a heater, they need some windows repaired, relatively minor things. We don't currently have budgets to deal with that, and that's particularly an issue for whānau-owned homes. There is some funding through TPK that can be applied, but I think what we're looking for is a more of a joined-up approach.
So I can understand why you want to go in and get it done straight away, but I would have thought that responsibility for payment of those things sits with the owner of the property.
Indeed, and that's part of the whole process we've worked through with the Tenancy Tribunal and the Tenancy Services as to how we can leverage off the existing regulatory regime to make those things happen. It's fair to say that that's not always an easy process, and there's quite a big power imbalance often between the tenant and the landlord, particularly in a situation where we've got at the moment of considerable competition for rental properties, and a market that really doesn't put a lot of incentive on landlords actually keeping their properties up to speed.
Right, so the mandatory minimum standards for rental housing that the government's looking to bring in would go some way to helping towards that?
Absolutely, yeah, no, absolutely, that would be very helpful.
I'll just take one bite of the cherry, Mr Chair.
One out of three.
Nick, I just wonder whether you could comment on the Regional Council's resource consent compliance regime around wastewater discharge in Napier City, waste and stormwater discharge into the Ahuriri estuary.
I don't recall us submitting on that specifically, but I'll attempt to answer your question. I think we are probably on record as having submitted to Napier City's long-term plan that we would welcome them focusing on addressing any risks from wastewater getting into the Ahuriri estuary. That's certainly something that I think has to be part of the picture.
Do you see any risks just taking a second bite of the cherry?
Well, I think there's some clear evidence that the levels of E. coli in the Ahuriri estuary exceed, particularly after heavy rainfall, so I don't think that's in dispute.
Tom?
Does your chairman or CEO participate in the, whatever the executive leaders group is that runs Hawke's Bay, supposedly?
The chair.
The chair does?
I believe there's both there's a governance group and a CEO's group.
And a management group.
Yep.
Star Chamber is called.
And they're in both. Sorry to answer your question, Nick.
No, thank you. You're closer to the action there.
Are there any more questions for Nick? Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it's been a difficult 2 years for you personally, having to add the front of all these challenging tasks, and you've done extremely well for us.
Thank you very much. I've obviously not had my colleague, Dr. McElnay, here either. So.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
We will stop for a cup of tea now.
Thanks, Nick.